guys and gals, and welcome to another volume of tips and tricks from the team here at BlenderTech.com. Don't forget to like the video and to subscribe for more Blender, Unity 3D, programming, and all sorts of other videos, where the team tries to add about one quality video a day. And lastly, don't forget to remember, create your way. So we are on Volume 9, I believe. I'm going to split this in two parts because I've been so busy with personal projects lately that I really haven't had time to come up with a good collection of tips and tricks. So Volume 9 is going to be, I'm going to call it the Sculpting Edition. I'm going to give you an overview of different ways to sculpt, how to get started sculpting, how sculpting has evolved, and some tips and tricks for sculpting. And then for 9B, I'm just going to quickly create a short little video of all the tips and tricks that I've picked up or just basically found out and written down over the last week since Volume 8 or 7 or I don't know. Actually, I think we're on Volume 8. Whichever volume it is, anyway, I'll have to check. So yeah, I'm going to create this one as a sculpting overview. So first off, a history of sculpting. So I've always wanted to learn how to sculpt in 3D, like extremely professionally, you know, like some of the artists on different websites do, and just some of the work I've seen is absolutely amazing, but I've never really got too much into it. But I do know the basics behind it, and I do know the history and the theory behind it. So in Blender, you obviously know that you can take a cube and you can add a subsurf. I'm just going to use the hotkey of Control 5. Yeah, Control 5, and that'll add a subsurf level 5. We can go up to 6. What's the lowest level that'll give us a sphere? I think about 3, 4. So yeah, we'll go level 3. So we know that a subsurf on a cube, if we go into edit mode, we'll turn it into a sphere. And so how does this relate to sculpt? So basically, what we're doing with the subsurf, or what people were doing and are doing still, is you have the ability to edit the high resolution geometry which is within the sphere by basically just changing one vertex in this. It's like a domain of some sort. So this is our low resolution, and that's our high resolution. Now, low and high resolution has to do with retopology, and it has to do with sculpting. So subsurf is a way to do that, but it's not the most modern or easiest way to do anything. Now, using a subsurf modifier, that's a part of any sort of modeling workflow that you're doing, personal projects, professional projects, whatever. But when it comes to sculpting, there's better tools and modifiers and options out there. So I'm going to show you some of these. Basically, our goal when it comes to sculpting is we want to be able to edit that high resolution mesh that's underneath here, the sphere that's in high resolution, but still maintain this ability to have this low resolution domain that will affect the entire mesh at once. But with simple subsurf, this doesn't allow that. So what can we do to fix that? So what came along many Blender versions ago is we had the multi-resolution modifier was added. So if I go along and I add another cube in here, this one I'm going to add the multi-resolution, or multi-res for short, modifier, and you can now subdivide this, and it does basically the same thing. If we subdivide it, that's 3 times, that's 4 times. We have the exact same geometry. It's based on the exact same math algorithms as the Catmull-Clark subdivision. You can see it uses the Catmull-Clark subdivision algorithms. So we have the exact same geometry. And now this gives us an advantage in terms of sculpting. So what this has to do with sculpting is, okay, we're on subdivision level 4. So we can go into sculpt mode now. And I'm just going to bring up my brushes toolbar, and I'm just going to use just, what would show this well? Probably the grab brush, I guess. And, we'll we'll just use draw. So it allows you, we can create detail on our mesh. I'll just create like some little bug sort of eyes, I guess. I don't know, just something just to show how this works. So alright, we've got some sculpting detail in there. But now, if I go and turn the sculpt levels down, basically it's unsubdividing it all the way down to level 0. But my sculpting is still propagating down to each level. So if I went down to level 1 now, and I say took the grab brush and changed its size much bigger, and say I grab the entire thing, that's gonna mess it up. If I grab the entire thing a little bit, something like that, now if I bring my sculpt level back up, you can see that it's pulled everything forward, but the original sculpting detail that I've put in there is still there. So I'm able to sculpt at different levels of resolution. And if I subdivide it even higher, say to level 6, and use sculpt draw again, and change the size back way down. Actually, I'm gonna do some things here. I'm gonna turn strength all the way up. So now just go somewhere else. If I sculpt something else in on level 6, it's a little bit slow since there's a ton of geometry now compared to before. So I've got these two giant huge balls that are coming out of here, whatever. So in each level I can go and sculpt differently. So that's our highest detail. So let's say I zoomed in here really finely, and I sculpted in some sort of maybe not that close, but say I sculpted in, or let's say I made a hole in the center of this one. So let's say it was like a monster's nostril or whatever. So I do that in sculpt level 6. So that's my highest level of detail. Then if I went down, say, a couple levels, and I decided to basically grab it and let me turn the size up again and push it in a little bit. I'll do it to this one too, just to show the effect. Now if we go back up to sculpt level 6, you can see my details are still there, but my details from my different sculpt levels are also propagating up and down to the different levels. So this is extremely powerful when it comes to sculpting. This was a great achievement for sculptors because it allowed you to sculpt at different levels, add details, go down to a lower level, and then make major changes, and then go back and forth and back and forth. So this is what a lot of people even still use today, but there is yet a better solution. Because the problem with this is, okay, it's great and all most of the time, but if I wanted to make a major change, let's say I went down to sculpt level 2 and I pulled this like way over, and then I went up to sculpt level 6. Okay, I have extra geometry to work with, it appears. But if I grab my draw brush and I try to draw on this now in high detail, because now I'm in my level 6, you can see all my details are preserved up there. But here where I've tried to create extra geometry to sculpt on, it's basically, you can see it's a mess. It just it doesn't work. So the geometry isn't there to be used. Not in most cases anyway. Not for anything super high detail. You can see the faces here they're shearing heavily, and they're oddly shaped and a lot bigger. Whereas down here, the faces are a lot smaller and they're of equal size, so I can sculpt more detail in easily. So that's the disadvantage to this, and that's where modelers needed something new. So the fix to that was a new modifier. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create another cube. So the new modifier was called the remesh. So before I show you exactly what this does, I'm going to go back. I'm going to add our subsurf modifier. Now, we know what that did before. We'll go up to level 4 again. So we have the exact same geometry. This time we're going to apply it. So we can, if we wanted, we could go ahead and we could sculpt directly onto this and it would make the adjustments. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use the grab brush again just for a major change. I'm going to bring the size way up, and I'm just going to really adjust the mesh. So let's, maybe not that crazy, but let's say I wanted something crazy like that, right? So you can see the faces get all distorted, and there's a lot of shearing going on again, and it's turning into a mess again. But let's say I needed this shape, or I wanted this shape. So that's where the beauty of the remesh modifier comes in. You go ahead and you turn it on to smooth, and now you have what's called this oct tree depth. So level 1, you basically kind of have your cube back, but as we turn it up, we get our mesh. Oh, I went up too high. We get our mesh, and it tries as best as possible to create new geometry. So if I go into wireframe, you can see now that instead of the stretched faces that I had before, I now have uniformly shaped faces. Now, obviously, this is an extreme example, so we still have a little bit of weirdness going on. But you can play with the settings and get better or worse results depending on how you play with it, right? So, and when you go to smooth shading, it really shows the effect. So this works almost like a subdivision surface, and so you decide, okay, I'm gonna go up to this level and start sculpting again. You can also turn your threshold up and down, and that'll make a difference. But then you hit apply, and then you go and you sculpt again. So now, like I said, if I go into wireframe, now we have equally shaped faces. So everything's it's good topology. So now I can go ahead and I can start doing some detailing sculpting again, wherever I want, basically. Let's say I'll just add in like a couple little weird eyes here again. So now we can do high detail sculpting on what was originally a low detail mesh. And so now if we go into wireframe, everything is like still equal shapes. But if I went and took my grab brush again and tried to really grab something really crazily again, I'll try from here. If you go into I keep forgetting about the Z one. If you go into wireframe, you can see that some stretching starts to happen. So the faces aren't perfect again. and you can see we get a little bit of artifacting again. So what I do is I just simply use the remesh modifier again, and I adjust my settings till I get the level of detail I want. And you can see that it preserves my high detail sculpting, but at the same time, if I go and apply, well, I don't need to apply yet, you can see that now everything is, as best as it can calculate, equal size faces again. So this is nearly completely dynamic topology, and technically it is a little slow, but I can technically sculpt on this with the remesh modifier active. As you can see, it's extremely slow, but I can, and it instantly recalculates how the faces should be. So you can see the after and before there. But then I can hit apply, and yeah, I have my mesh ready to go, ready to start doing some more sculpting. But there's still better out there. There was a new edition. This is still years ago. Because the problem with this one, now I'll explain, is that, whoops, if I try to go and do some really high detail sculpting, like let's say I wanted just something very high detailed in here, some sort of like scar maybe, just something that's, you know, extremely high detailed. If I go and remesh this, 9 times out of 10, I'm gonna lose most, if not all, of that detail, even if I turn it up. Now, as you can see, like I'm at level 8, 9, it's really starting to try to calculate. You can see it tries to preserve it, but it's not perfect. So there is some issues with that. Now I'm really getting, I'm on sharp, I guess. I should go to smooth. Let it recalculate. So it tries to preserve the details I've sculpted, but it's not perfect. So it's not complete dynamic topology. So that's where the next edition comes in. So I'm going to get out of sculpt mode. I'm going to apply that first so that it's not slowing me down. Oh, it takes a while to calculate. Another hindrance. So I'm going to go and I'm going to create another cube here. Somewhere usable.
And tapping into edit mode, we can see.
So now what Blender has is nearly perfect, or you could sometimes call it perfect dynamic topology. So if I go ahead and add a subdivision surface, go down to level, we'll go down to level 4 again. So we have the same geometry as before. I'm going to go into sculpt mode. We have, where is it? So like I said, I don't do a lot of sculpting, but I believe under Titan Topo. So yeah, dynamic topology alters the mesh topology while sculpting. So if I enable this, and I'm in draw right now, basically, so right now in wireframe, if you see, I have a nicely subdivided cube. Actually, let me undo. So this is before I enabled dynamic topology. If I re-enable it, you can see that it triangulated the faces. That is very important for us for a certain reason. So I'll start with a detail size of 30, and this is in pixels. You can see 30 pixels. So this, if you read the tooltip, the maximum edge length for dynamic topology sculpting in pixels. So this is going to be how long each line is. So basically, if I go and sculpt and I sculpt basically a quad, each side is going to be 30 pixels wide. So if I go ahead and sculpt now, I can create my little some sort of button eyeballs things. It's a little bit slow than just sculpting normally, but it pays off dividends highly. So if we go into wireframe now, you can see that all the faces are exactly equal and the topology is 99% perfect. And now you might say, okay, that's kind of cool. That's great. What is so great about dynamic topology? Well, let me show you. Remember the grab brush before, the problems it gave us? It gave us all these artifacting, and the remesh did solve it, but we still didn't get perfect geometry. And when we tried to grab with multi-res, it just completely created horrible topology, and yeah, it just did not work at all. With dynamic topology enabled, if I grab this now and pull it out, I'll go back into wireframe now. As you can see, it's created nice, even geometry on the fly. So basically what it's doing is it's creating or before I get that far in, let's go back to draw, because I want to keep explaining this detail size. So that was detail size 30. Let me cut it down to 10, so 1/3. So you can see now on the fly, I can sculpt even more detail in. So I'll make some sort of ring around in the middle here. Again, it's a little slow, but it's not terrible by any means. It's completely usable, depending on your system. I don't have a super high-end system. It's new, but it's not super high-end. If I go into wireframe, you can see it's perfect triangulated. It's perfect geometry. As good as you're going to get without spending thousands of hours fixing every single vertice. And then if I turn the detail size even lower, down about 5 is as low as I will ever go. I can get even better details. So like I said, if I wanted to make really fine details, I can go really detailed. And then if we go into wireframe, you can see that at each detail level, it's creating smaller and smaller geometry, but it's still keeping the topology perfect. It's still perfect topology. So you don't need to make a lot of changes before you go and retopologize your high detail mesh to a low detail mesh. So yeah, that's what the detail size does. It basically allows you to create extremely fine detail on a lower poly mesh automatically. But now, like I said, the great thing, if we take the grab tool on detail size 5 and we pull something out, if I go into wireframe mode, you can see that it's created new geometry completely on the fly, basically out of nowhere, and it's perfect. So if I go into solid, another thing I'll bring up, if I go shade smooth, can I do that like this? Oh, I need to enable it here, smooth shading. You can see that once you get down below, like at level 30, you can see a few little artifacts here and there, but once you get down to level 5, you can't tell the difference. I mean, that's as smooth as you're ever gonna need. So that's the great thing. But you can see that the topology here is basically perfect, and we've basically created that out of thin air. So I mean, compare that to this mess that the remesh tried to create. But the great thing about this is, okay, yeah, that's awesome. We have this nice good topology, but it is still low poly. There's not a billion faces in there. Okay, well, let me show you the magic here. I'm still on detail level 5. If I go back to my draw brush, I can still sculpt extremely high detail things on that low poly mesh that we've just created out of thin air magically. Basically, this is where it gets a little slow because it's really got to do some calculating. Blender hasn't totally perfected it, but now if I go into wireframe, you can see that it's updated the topology. It's not 100% perfect anymore, but it's updated that topology to where we can add high detail sculpting details on to low poly objects. So to very quickly like see how that works, it hardly affects the low poly mesh underneath. To show you this in more detail, I'm just going to go ahead and create just a basic cube. I'm not going to do any subdividing. I'm just going to go straight into sculpt mode. I'm going to enable dynamic topology. I'm going to go detail size 5. I'm just going to add in since we have smooth shader, I'm going to add in a edge split. I'm going to apply whoa, I didn't mean to do that. Sorry, that's my break notification. Going to sculpt mode. So now we have this extremely low poly mesh. It's got 4 sides. It's got 6 faces. But I can still sculpt. Okay, never mind. Sorry, that's not what I meant to do. I do need to subdivide it at least once. So I'm going to subdivide this a few times. In edit mode. Oh, it already triangulated it. I don't want it triangulated. Whatever, we can leave it triangulated. We'll just subdivide. So I'll just subdivide it a couple times. So we have 768 faces. That is low poly by extreme definition of the word. Now if I go into sculpt mode and enable dynamic topology, I can go and I can add high detail sculpting to this extremely low poly mesh, and you can see that for the most part it works perfectly. There might be a little bit of fixing you have to do, and if you start with an even higher poly mesh, it's going to work out even better for you. But yeah, basically for the most part it's perfect. You can see with a mesh, if I start off with a mesh this low poly, it's not going to be that great. If I bump up the detail size, whoops, didn't mean to do that. Shows you how nice it can work though. If I bump up the detail size, you can see how it works a little bit differently on a high poly mesh. So yeah, basically, if I go into wireframe, I still have my low poly mesh where I haven't modified it, but in the areas where I have, it's turned it into a high poly mesh. So this is great because I don't have to subdivide it a billion times to be able to sculpt on it. So this is, yeah, it's dynamic topology by the complete definition of the word. So yeah, this is a great tool. Not a lot of people know about it. They just go start sculpting on something that they've subdivided a million times, and they end up with 3 million faces, whereas here I only have 463,000, and that's because I was on detail level 5, which, like I said, is extremely, extremely low. So that's just the different ways to sculpt, and yeah, I just wanted to kind of show that off. It's something that I learned, and I wanted to make sure that other people knew about these modifiers and how they work and what they do in basic form. So yeah, that's about all I have for the sculpting edition of this little tips and tricks. So thanks for watching from the team here at blendertech.com. Again, that's blendertek.com. If you enjoyed this video and learned something, please like it, and don't forget to subscribe for more Blender, Unity 3D, programming, and all sorts of other videos. We also now offer hard copies of our videos, so if you'd like a copy to download on your computer to watch later, just let us know and we'll upload it to our server. Sorry, my phone, for you to watch later in the media player of your choice. Great. If you dislike this video for some reason, don't just leave. Instead, leave a comment or email the team at info@blendertech.com about what you did not like. We also take requests for tutorials, so let us know what you want or want more of. See you next time, and remember, create your way. And don't forget that I'm not a professional sculptor. I've done barely any sculpting, so I may not know 100% what I'm talking about, but I did want to show this off to you guys. Anyways, see you later.